things that I think Americans want to hear that they're not going to hear from this president, unfortunately. I think Americans want to know about border security. What's happening at the border. There's a humanitarian crisis, not at another country's border, but at the United States border right now. They want to know that the fentanyl is being stopped from coming into this country. There's been enough fentanyl brought in this country over the last several months to kill every man, woman, and child in the United States.
That was U.S. Representative Austin Scott's answer to what he thinks the people of South Georgia want to hear when they tune into the State of the Union tonight.
And joining us on the phone right now is Representative Scott. Good morning. Thank you so much for waking up with us this morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having us.
Well, the Congressman will get started. Why do you think border security and stopping fentanyl is the biggest issue they need to hear tonight during President Biden's first State of the Union?
Yeah, well, certainly that has been and continues to be a big issue. It is the flow of illegal immigration and substances over our border is something that I think every American wants to see stop. And there's a huge humanitarian crisis at our own border. And so that statement was obviously before Russia invaded the Ukraine. I think the focus tonight will shift from the current border scenario inside the United States and around the United States to what's happening with the Ukraine and with our economy and the impacts on our economy from the sanctions and other things that are being levied.
Representative Scott, what are you expecting to hear from tonight's address?
Well, I expect him to say there will be no boots on the ground, which I think is a mistake. I think that we should be expressing our absolute resolve for NATO and the NATO mission that if the atrocities carried out by Russia continue to increase, and it certainly appears from watching all of the news that they are going to increase, then I think that someone will have to step in to stop that, or you'll just see the absolute slaughter of millions of human beings, and we'll wake up every morning to a report of how many people were lost. And so I do think that there is potential that the UN does have to step in. I do think that if the UN steps in, we are part of that alliance, and we need to make it absolutely clear that we will support the UN mission. And if there is broad agreement from our European partners, I'm sorry, I said UN, I meant NATO. If there's broad support of our NATO partners to put either planes in the sky or troops on the ground or ships in the sea to stop the killing of the innocent lives in the Ukraine, then the United States needs to support that NATO mission.
Well, Congressman, how do you think the president has done in the last year?
So let me tell you what I think has done right. First, we had, in December, we had impeccable intelligence and predictions on what Russia was going to do based on the buildup of their troops. So our intelligence community deserves a lot of credit for what they were telling us they expected to happen in the Ukraine. I think it was right to release the information to the general public. I think the public was better served to expect the things in the Ukraine to happen. And unfortunately, we did not put the sanctions in when we should have put the sanctions in against Russia back in December when we had the intel on what Russians' plans were. It takes weeks to months for those sanctions to kick in and begin to hurt Vladimir Putin and the economy. And so, unfortunately, if we had done it in December when many of us wanted to, he would already be feeling the effects of it. By not doing that, the president gave him an extra 2 months to accumulate reserves in his banks, and he was smart enough to do it Vladimir Putin was smart enough to do that in foreign currencies, so that as the ruble falls, those other currency values will continue to hold for him. That's what we've seen over the last several months. Now, again, he needs to come out and say that the United States will absolutely support our NATO partner in any mission in the Ukraine. Now, as far as domestic policy, it's obvious what he's done wrong. I mean, the price of fuel, and I would remind you, when I go to the grocery store every week and I buy my kids bananas and milk and the other things that we buy to eat on a daily and weekly basis, everything gets to that grocery store with diesel. And so when you raise the price of fuel and your policies raise the price of fuel the way President Biden's policies have, it raises the cost of everything. And so higher fuel prices mean higher food prices. And he needs to go back to the policies that we had before he was president with regard to domestic energy production. And let's get these gas prices and diesel prices down. And that's the number one thing that he could do to help with inflation. Now, I don't expect him to do that. Candidly, I do not expect him to admit that he's made some mistakes, and I don't expect him to admit that his policies with regard to domestic energy production have led to what we're seeing now, which is, better than $4 a gallon for diesel in the state of Georgia.
Representative Scott, do you think the president is doing enough to end the crisis in Ukraine?
No, absolutely not. He is. He keeps telling Vladimir Putin what we won't do. The last thing you would want to tell Vladimir Putin is what you won't do. And when you tell Putin you're not going to do this and put any sanctions on until he actually invades, then you allow Putin to accumulate the reserves that he accumulated in his central banks and in Russia, and he was smart enough. Putin was smart enough to do it in other currencies because he knew that when the sanctions kicked in, that it would affect the ruble. Now, I don't understand why you tell Vladimir Putin what you're not going to do, and by telling Vladimir Putin what we're not going to do, he's made Vladimir Putin's mission easier for Vladimir Putin. Putin is not a good guy. He's not a guy that we can understand over here. You just look at the TV and see what he's doing to people, and then to continue to say no American troops on the ground. None of us want to go to war over there. But if our NATO allies determine that the only way to stop the literal slaughter of human lives like we haven't seen since World War II is to step in with air power and manpower and sea power to push Russia back into Russia, then the United States needs to make it absolutely clear that the U.S. will support the NATO mission.
All right, well, we will see exactly what the president will say tonight. But once again, that was U.S. Representative Austin Scott from Georgia's 8th Congressional District. Thank you so much for speaking with us this morning.
Hey, thank you.